Welcome to the Healing Heart podcast, where all healing is always a matter of the heart. I'm your host, Donna Campbell, also known as the Mind Whisperer, interviewing guest experts on all matters of healing. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Healing Heart podcast. And I am your host, Donna Campbell. You know how shift happens? Those situations that keep you up at night and cause you to question yourself, your purpose, your career, and even your relationships. My guest today totally gets it. She helps and empowers women to learn and truly understand who they are not, and to establish those healthy boundaries. She calls herself a radical self-compassion. She is Dr. Susan Hughes. She's a physician, a mom of two awesome kids, a wife, a certified business and life coach, an international speaker, a two-time #1 international best-selling author, along, if that's not enough, being the CEO of Bounce Highest. So after a tragic auto accident, her life totally dramatically changed, and she retired from clinical medicine. And now she's also an unapologetic traumatic brain survivor and works every day to help other women overcome the major challenges that they experience in their lives. Her mission is growing from impact to becoming impactful. So she walks the talk every day. Growing up in the Midwest, she lived in Europe for 3 years and then practiced in the Pacific Northwest for over 20 years before retiring to the sunny Southwest. So everyone, let's welcome Dr. Susan Hughes. Susan, welcome to the Healing Heart podcast.
Thank you so much. That was so sweet. I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yes, and we're happy to have you. So it looked like you had a life-changing experience with an auto accident. Share with us that and how it transformed your life.
Well, there never is a great time to have a car accident.
No.
Think about it. There never is. But I don't know if there could have been a worse time to have a car accident. I was on vacation with my husband and our 2 kids, and we got hit by someone who never saw us. My head hit the window and our lives changed in a moment. But the timing of it was also affected as my husband was just finishing radiation treatment for cancer.
Oh, wow.
So I was the primary breadwinner and my head hit the window. It was the side window. I was wearing a seatbelt, always wear a seatbelt. And orthopedic injuries, facial injuries, but the biggest one was the traumatic brain injury. My eyes literally would not work together. So I could read about 10 minutes before they would totally fatigue out. And I had about almost 3 years of vision therapy and over 2 of speech, physical therapy and occupational therapy. It was a long haul. So obviously I had to retire from clinical practice, but then I was speaking from the stage, and I know you speak too, and you'll recognize that sometimes you get your own aha moments when you're speaking. So I was speaking from the stage with James Malachek and Julie Carrier in Los Angeles, and I was up there and I was talking about, I've been teaching about post-traumatic growth for a while, and I talked about how grateful I was for being alive, that my kids weren't hurt, that my husband was okay. And it hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't just grateful for being alive. I was grateful for being the person I am now, not due to the car accident, but because of the car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I developed my company called Bounce Highest, because it's not just bouncing back from adversity or even bouncing higher, but truly bouncing highest.
Yes. So share with us a little bit more there about bouncing the highest, because well, one, I'll say it seems like there's always that catalyst for change, that transformational moment in every person's life that invokes the healing. And then from there, we take that and then we can use those gifts and abilities to help other people transform as well, which is what you're in the business of doing, is transforming lives with your business, with what you have. So share with us a little bit more about Bounce Highest and what you do.
bounce highest came from, I had been working with people, advocacy for a long time. Obviously, as a physician, I had been focused on healing. But this was a different type of healing.
Mhm.
In medicine, people would come to me, I'd give them a prescription, but a lot of times I would simply write the word no on a prescription pad, have them laminate it and put it in their billfolds. Why would I do that?
Wow.
Because too often, you get it as a woman, we are voluntold to do things that we really don't want to do,
Mhm.
that we have not the greatest boundaries. And so
Mhm.
even when I was practicing medicine, I was helping women establish better boundaries.
Mhm.
And the method that I use, I call radical self compassion. And that's really getting clarity on
Mhm.
who you are not. And in that space in between, having that healthy boundary. But the last part is giving yourself grace when you allow people to violate that boundary.
Ooh,
And
I like that.
we know that that happens all the time. We know that shift happens. And so, what I try to do is give women tools so that they can prepare themselves for the next time shift happens.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely there. So when you talk about setting boundaries, because those are words that I hear so often, especially in the personal development, transformational, coaching, mindset arena. So for you, what does setting boundaries really mean? And what really is the end result that the person's trying to receive by having that boundary?
It's self compassion. When someone sets a boundary, they're reclaiming part of themselves, because too often when our boundaries are violated, that space between you and not you gets blurred.
Mhm.
And too often we take ownership for things that we really shouldn't be taking ownership for. And other times we should be taking ownership. So I can only control what I can do. So
Mhm.
I used to, when I was taking care of my patients, I used to have them stretch their arms way out and stretch it way up and way down. And that was their sphere of influence.
Mhm.
They could only control how they responded to a situation. They couldn't control all situations around us. That would be scary and exciting and terrifying all at the same time if we could control everything. But the reality is we can't, but we can control how we respond to something.
Mhm.
I couldn't control the car accident, but I could control how I responded to it. And those healthy boundaries are really important because too often those of us who are healers try to rescue people.
Mhm.
I bet people listening here have gone, oh yeah, I've tried to fix people. I've tried to rescue people. And the reality is, if we keep trying to rescue people and keep trying to do things, it may actually hurt them by not allowing them to have the skills or the experience that they need to grow personally. So
Mhm.
having healthy boundaries are not just about yourself, even though it's it's so important to have that for your own physical safety, your emotional safety, for your own personal growth, but it's also a gift you can give others that the others that you're talking to and working with.
Mhm. And I think you're absolutely right there. And I love the words that when you're setting boundaries, you're really looking at and for your own self compassion. Because often when you ask people, what, do you really want as that result? It comes down to, I need to be loyal to myself, or I need to honor who I am rather than giving it away to another person. And I think as women, we fall always, prey to that natural nurturing ability because we want to help everybody. And then if you're a healer, it just magnifies that way. So, what are some of the things that you think about or that come up when you're working with some of the different clients to why we choose to violate those boundaries before honoring ourselves first?
Well, I think you alluded to it. We're helpers.
Mhm.
We'd like to make a difference. I mean, if you think about, the 6 human needs that Tony Robbins talks about, the need for certainty, the need for variety, the need for growth, and the need for contribution,
Mhm.
the need for significance. Those needs for contribution and those needs for significance, so much of our identity is tied up in being able to make a difference for people,
Mhm.
as opposed to creating an opportunity for people to make a difference. There's
Ooh,
sort of a difference.
there
There's
is.
a separation with that. And it's so important to have that clarity when you're working with people as women, especially women professionals in a man's world.
Mhm.
We we do more, we volunteer more, we don't say no, even though we're exhausted, burned out, whatever. And we're really good at being voluntold, being told you're going to be doing this without necessarily getting paid for it.
Mhm.
A lot of times men will be asked to do something and reimbursed, whereas women will be told to do something and not being reimbursed.
Mhm.
And so it's taking that step back and saying, okay, this is me, this is not me,
Mhm.
and owning your worth,
Ooh, yes.
owning your worth.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that I also think about too, because when you were talking earlier, is that we as women, we want to go out and help everybody. And it brings me back to the time that I wrote out what I call a healer's creed. And there's three things to a healer's creed. One, they have to ask for the healing. They have to ask for the help. And that's, when you first learn something, you want to run around and help everybody because you learned this great tool or this new skill set, but they have to ask for it because that's meaningful. The second thing that I had with the healer's creed is you cannot want the healing more than the other person, meaning that they have to want it. They have to have the desire for it, and you have to be unattached to the outcome. And then the third thing that I had for the Healer's Creed was you cannot violate another person's free will. You can't. And it's law actually, because you never can. But at the same time, you can't have the intent to violate another person's free will. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that quick sponsor break here and we're going to let Susan think about this. And when we come back, I'm going to get her thoughts and opinion on that Healer's Creed and some tips for all of us to move forward. Hold on just a moment. Get what you always wanted. Abundant life is possible. Transform your lifestyle in just weeks with the most innovative system developed for heart-centered business professionals who seek change today. You are one step away from creating infinite prosperity, happiness, and love. Grab your bonus link now that's in the show notes. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Healing Heart podcast. And my guest today is Dr. Susan Hughes. And we were just talking about what I shared about having the Healer's Creed. So Susan, share with us your thoughts about the Healer's Creed.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think you pointed out once we learn something, we want to share it with the world. And you know what? Sometimes the world isn't ready for it, doesn't care about it, doesn't want it, doesn't need it. They may not be in that space right time. So I think having those ask for it is so important. The next part you talked about, I worked with my patients all the time. And the philosophy I had was if I'm working harder at getting you well than you are, then there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with my business and life coaching clients. If I'm working harder at trying to help them reach their goals, it's not a good scenario. It's not a good scenario. And the other part that you talked about with free will, that has to do with boundaries. I may coaching versus consulting versus being a physician. As a physician, people would come to me for advice. I'd lay it out. I'd give them different options. I would present them with opportunities for their own health. When
Mhm.
people come to me for business advice, it's similar, but it's got a different slant to it because I would help them kind of learn some tools along the way, help them see some of their own have some of their own aha moments. And with coaching, it's all about aha
Mhm.
moments. So it's similar to being a teacher. When you're a teacher, you can stand up and you can tell the kids what they need to know. But if you teach them how to learn, that's a totally different scenario. So I get to combine these different tools when I'm working with people
Mhm.
and love it. But again, I can't impose it upon them. I can sit there and wave and say, hey, look here. But they've got to make that step to claim it. They've got to make that decision to move forward with it. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay.
I love that. They have to take the step to claim it. And it's so interesting because those words come up in a lot of different writings. Even if you go back to the 15th and 16th centuries, it says you have to claim it. Books that we all reference, like the scientific study of getting rich or something like that. And it says you have to claim it. So accept it as your own. So share with us some of your tips that you use to help women move forward with setting boundaries. What are some of the non-negotiables that you have? You mentioned earlier putting the word no in your wallet book, but what are some other tips that you have?
I love that you use the words non-negotiable because that's what I teach with as well. And I put together a mini training as well as worksheets for people. And that's my gift in being on your podcast. And there's a link for that. But part of it is recognizing one, I call it Dr. Susan's 2-minute rule.
Mhm.
The advantage in having a brain injury is I've learned I have to take care of it now
Mhm.
because I may not necessarily remember to take care of it later. So if something's in front of me and I can get it done in about 2 minutes or less, just do it. Don't put it off till later because it's going to take you more energy to come back to it. And that energy basically is precious energy. Every morning I get up and I have so many units in the bank of Susan. You
Mhm.
get up and you get so many units in the bank of Donna. And these are not rollover units. We don't get to take the ones that we didn't use today and save them for tomorrow. And some days I get up and I have 100 units in the bank of Susan. And score. I can get so much done. And then some days I get up and I have 10 units in the bank of Susan. And that's when I have to say, uh-oh, time to hunker down a little bit. And what it is precious energy.
Mhm.
And we only have so much precious energy. And the point is, some days we have more, some days we have less, but we need to be aware of it. And that's really important when we're setting boundaries as well, because some days we might have a little more fluidity in a
Mhm.
boundary. We might be able to help a little more. We might be able to volunteer. Other days, mm-mm. I call it cocooning. And that's where you just kind of envelop yourself and focus on self-care and do what you need to do to take care of you. So 2-minute rule. The other is non-negotiables. Every night before I go to bed, I set my alarms throughout the day.
Mhm.
So I look at my Google Calendar and, for the podcast today, it's like, okay, I set it a half an hour beforehand and 15 minutes beforehand. So I would have everything all ready. And I don't go to sleep until I have set my alarms for tomorrow. That is a non-negotiable. Um, so I think having a morning routine and having an evening routine, and I've got all of these in a mini video as well as handouts, but every morning, if you've got the same thing that you need to be doing, it becomes habit. And
Mhm.
why does it become a habit? It becomes a habit because you've laid down those neural pathways. And as a physician, I teach brain-based tools to help people make things more automatic in their life. we have over 60,000 thoughts per day.
Uh-huh.
So most of them are not self-serving.
Nope. They're not.
Most of them come back through evolution to keep us from being eaten by saber-toothed tigers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't serve us now. They don't. But recognizing things that we do now, if we do them repeatedly, we do them with intention, we start wiring those neurons together. The other thing that's important, if you're screaming at somebody, if you're, as parents, if we're screaming at somebody, or if we put them in a fight or flight or freeze situation, they can't learn.
Right.
Because, and it's physiologic.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the neurons, which are the nerves in the brain, and in between those, we've got this space, and in that space, we've got the neurotransmitters, things like dopamine, things like serotonin, things like epinephrine, norepinephrine. But when you're really stressed, cortisol, which is the stress hormone, floods that space, so you physiologically cannot learn.
Mm-hmm.
So part of this with non-negotiables is understanding how you can rewire your brain for success. Part of this is getting into those routines, those habits, those automations, so you don't have to use your precious energy for other things.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So how can all of our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, there's lots of ways, and I know that you'll share the links, but bouncehighest.com, Bounce Highest. I've got a Facebook page. I also have a private women's group, women only, sorry guys. And that is for navigating those unexpected obstacles. And that's a private women's Facebook group. I'm also on Instagram at Bounce Highest, and on LinkedIn at Dr. Susan Z. Hughes.
Love it.
So, I'm findable. I'm findable.
All right. Awesome. And for everybody out there, we will have all of those links in the show notes. So make sure you grab them, start utilizing some of her tips today. She gets you results, you guys. So show up for your own success, and definitely start moving forward for you on your own journey. And with everyone else, as always, with the Healing Heart podcast, go create that beautiful day.